Welcome back to the Cover 2 Zone. We are out of Week 8 and looking ahead to Week 9. Another huge week in the NFL, right around the halfway point now. Ollie is back to review this week and to preview Week 9. Let's jump into it, Ollie. Let's start straight away. There's only one place to start. The Bengals 38, the Jets 39. Wow. What a game. The Jets with a miraculous turnaround to win their first game of the season, and you could kind of sense in that fourth quarter that it was coming, couldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough game. Sort of, you're looking at it, end of the first, it's 10-0 to the Bengals. End of the second, it's 24-13. And as a Bengals fan, I'm thinking, yeah, they're the worst team in the league. We're beating them. Everything's going right. Even at the end of the third, it's 31-16. And you sort of go, cool, that's, put that to bed. That's finished. And then it just sort of falls apart. It's, I don't know, it's just a sign of where the Bengals are at the moment, I think. And I think, if Joe Burrow's healthy, they win the game. Joe Flacco, clearly better than other options, but still not enough.
Well, I don't know if you can blame the offense in this game. I mean, you scored 38 points. Anytime you score 38 points in a game, you'd probably expect to win it. Let's start at the beginning. The Bengals came out hot. Long touchdown to Higgins in the second quarter from Flacco. And as you said, they went into halftime 31-16 up. To be fair to Justin Fields and the Jets, he kind of kept them within an arm's length the whole game, didn't he? Fields laid a beautiful touch pass to Johnson, and with pressure in his face to really keep the Jets in touch. And then down 31-16 at the start of the fourth quarter. Fields, it felt like he did enough the whole game to keep it close and to give the Jets a chance of doing something. And then, in the fourth quarter, their defense, who had been largely poor the whole game, stepped it up and complemented the offense to put a fourth quarter together where they were able to then win the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, I've got a few things noted down. I thought that Fields' 2-point conversion was vintage Justin Fields in terms of what we remember of him being, that sort of Madden running quarterback where he's just sort of like running around in circles and then suddenly he's in the end zone, and I think certainly, the defense stepped up. 7:33 left in the game, third down. They get the only sack in the game, sacking Flacco there. And that pretty much is the turning point in the game, really. I think it stops the Bengals from going on and getting anything out of that drive. And it means that the Jets, can start to turn things around. But I think this is a tale of two of the worst defenses in the league as a game, right? The Jets defense clearly isn't doing it. I don't quite know what's going wrong for Aaron Glenn in that, locker room. And the Bengals defense, we knew at the start of the season was going to be bad, and the whole style of the team is to outscore people. The
Jets defense is a puzzling one to me, because especially in this game, they gave up huge chunks in the running game. They were just, the Bengals seemed to slice through the Jets defensive line. When you got players on there, Will McDonald, who I think was the one getting the sack, that big sack of Flacco in the end. Quinnen Williams as well. There's good players on that front, isn't there? And I know people have been in and out with injuries and stuff like that, but on paper, this is a decent, at very worst, a decent defense that should be doing a lot better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the Jets offense in this game seemed to start firing in the way that it's designed to. 254 total rushing yards across the team is what that offense about. And I think Breece Hall in particular really, really stepped up. Finally, as a fantasy owner of him, to get a performance out of him was good. Equally though, on the other team, Samaje Perine still showing that he's got it, 9 carries, 94 yards and a touchdown. It was a big running game. And I think, it's fair to say that certain things went well for the Jets. Right at the end of the first half, they had a really good drive, made good decisions about, stopping the clock and getting a field goal in that drive. And at the end of the day, it was a 1-point game. If they hadn't scored a field goal then, if they'd been pushing, trying to score a touchdown, it could have gone the other way.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Breece Hall. As you said, it was a much better performance from him, and he even ends up throwing a touchdown pass for Mason Taylor. I mean, that is when you haven't won a game and you're within touching distance of doing so, that is a really gutsy call, isn't it? To hand it to your running back to throw a potential touchdown pass. That I don't know what to say about that, really. I can't tell whether that was genius or foolishness, really. Because if that doesn't come off, you're looking at the Jets offense going, what are you doing? This is the reason you haven't won a game. But it does come off, and we're talking about a brilliant performance from Breece Hall.
Is it sort of classic risk taking by a coaching group that are looking to keep their jobs, or find new jobs in the summer?
Yeah.
Calling a play like that shows a bit of creativity. Is that what they're trying to do now? And as it is, it won them the game. So it was worth doing.
Yeah, moving on to the Bengals. It's a really, really poor loss, this. I mean, at home, you've got the lead in the fourth quarter. You've got a comfortable lead in the fourth quarter. And it just piles, we talked about it a little bit there, it piles more questions on this defense, doesn't it? That they scored 38 points and the defense cannot win them. They cannot do enough to win them the game. Do you think, as well after that last week, it's such a big win against the Steelers, which was bound to have Bengals fans feeling positive. I mean, me and Eden talked about, if Joe Flacco can produce these kind of performances and the Bengals can just get through to the point where Joe Burrow is healthy again down the stretch, however many games that may be, they might be in touching distance of even winning the division and certainly a wild card spot. And who knows what can happen then. But this is a really bad loss, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And I think, as we say, it is the defense. Because if you look around the offense, Chase played well, Higgins played well, Chase Brown played well. Samaje Perine had a good stat line. Noah Fant caught everything that was thrown at him.
The offensive line was really good.
So it's not a case of them misfiring. It's just a case of a defense that can't do anything. And when you start to think, they came to that deal with Trey Hendrickson to pay him, the big money that he wanted on a 1-year deal. It's not really looking worthwhile now, is it? He's not going to be finding a big contract at the end of this season for anyone. And actually, if you look around the rest of the defense, is there anybody that is putting their hands up to say, I'm the guy here? I don't really think there is.
Yeah. On the flip side of that, just to finish on this game, can this get the Jets going? There was question marks coming into this game. Should Justin Fields still be the starting quarterback? They've stuck with him. He's produced a performance, presumably, which is, he's going to be the starting quarterback in the next game. But there were questions, weren't there, about whether it should be Tyrod Taylor. Aaron Glenn, is he lucky to still be in a job? Do you think this can get the Jets going, or do you think this is just still a one-off kind of, one quarter of good football that they've played, really?
I think I'm more confident, given that it was a run-heavy attack, if that makes sense. I think if it had been a pass-heavy game and they'd had 400 passing yards and it would all come in the passing game, I wouldn't feel that confident that was repeatable. But I think when you run the ball that well all game, that shows signs of a team that are starting to commit to a philosophy and staying to one thing. If they can stick to the run game, if they can keep that rolling, then that's positive. But as I say, the Bengals are so poor on defense that actually, is this a sign that the Jets' run game was good, or just the inevitable run game that they should have had anyway?
Yeah. Interesting questions, but a big win for the Jets. Bad loss for the Bengals, as we've said. Moving on to our second game, which was perhaps the upset of the week. The Miami Dolphins 34, the Atlanta Falcons 10. Obviously, I'm buzzing. This was again similar to the Jets, not the first win, obviously, of the season for the Dolphins, but it's only the second, and the Dolphins were excellent in this game. Tua faced a lot of criticism in the last couple of weeks. and he fired back in this game. He had a brilliant performance. Yes, for the Falcons, there was no Penix or Drake London. So you are taking away the quarterback, and you are taking away, their biggest weapon at wide receiver. But the Dolphins were excellent in this game, and Kirk Cousins, it's not as if they've had Michael Penix out and they've had to plug in a rookie who's never played before, or a journeyman kind of. He is a journeyman a little bit, but he's an experienced guy who's played a lot of games at starting quarterback in the NFL, and he didn't look good in this game, did he?
No, he looked out of sync. There were a lot of overthrows and underthrows, and maybe it's a case of he's been training with the twos all season, and he's in sync with those guys, because a couple of the receivers that you wouldn't normally expect to have done well seem to play pretty well at the weekend. But yeah, 21 out of 31 for 173 yards. It's not a nice stat line, is it? I mean, it's not a bad completion rate, but 21 completions for 173 yards really isn't anything to cheer on. And I think, Cousins not playing well then leads to the rest of the team struggling. Bijan, 9 carries for 25 yards, 3 catches for 23 yards, a fumble. That's a bad stat line for one of the league's best, isn't it?
Well, I was just about to say, I mean, Achane, Gordon, and Jalen Wright combined for 141 yards, whilst Bijan Robinson only gets 25 for the Falcons. It was chalk and cheese really in the run game, which you wouldn't expect. Obviously, Achane's shown that he's a very good player. Ollie Gordon's shown flashes this season. Haven't seen too much of Wright, but they combined really well, and the play calling for the Dolphins and the execution of those plays looked so much smoother and well run, didn't it? The offensive line was so much better in this game, and then you flip it over to the defense, who played so much better. The coverage was a lot tighter. Yes, again they didn't have London, but you limit Bijan Robinson to 25 yards as a defense, you've had a good day. And they put pressure on Cousins as well. That was a big part of why he couldn't find receivers downfield. And Zach Sealer has a better game this game. We haven't seen too much of him this season, and it was just a complete performance, wasn't it, from the Dolphins? Yeah,
and I think a lot of it almost comes to taking some of the pressure off of Tua, right? If you look at it, it was the first touchdown in the first quarter was his first quarter touchdown in 13 games. That's a fairly scary stat. But if you look at the stat line across the game, 27 passes, 37 rushes, the Dolphins offense. That's not the current shape of the NFL. A complete run first performance. But it takes the pressure off of Tua. It enables him to throw the ball when he has to, but not all the time, which leads to Jalen Waddle, 5 or 6 for 99 yards and a touchdown. Probably his best performance of the season. And he was starting to look like he looked out of Bama and in his first couple of years in the league again.
Going back to Tua, he finished 20 of 26, 205 yards and 4 touchdowns. Was this more like the Tua we're used to seeing in the regard that he's not going to bomb the ball down the field too often? He's going to be accurate, and he's going to complete a lot of passes. He's going to take short routes. He's going to hit running backs coming out of the backfield on quick routes. Was this more of the Tua we're used to seeing when he has been good in the league?
Yeah, and I think Tua, as I say, when you give him a good run attack, that means that he's throwing the ball on 2nd and 4 instead of 2nd and 12. It all leads to him being able to take percentage throws, take the quick short yardage stuff that's sort of easy completions. And I think what he needs really, probably for the rest of this season, is just those confidence building performances. Nothing that's going to absolutely blow him out of the water, nothing that's going to say he's MVP, but just slowly build his confidence back up as a quarterback in this league. Because otherwise, we've seen him go into games where he's spiraling and the confidence goes and he's having to try and put it all on his shoulders, and that doesn't work for him.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about the Dolphins going down the line in the preview of Week 9 later on. But for the Falcons, they drop to 3-4 now on the season, and the Falcons fans must be so frustrated because this is a game at home they should have won against a team that's really struggling. They lost to the Panthers. What was it, 30-0 a few weeks ago? Yes, the Panthers have been improved this season, but that was a real poor performance as well. This is a team that has shown a lot of really good glimpses of potential, hasn't it, this season? But had some really bad moments as well. Do you think there's pressure on Raheem Morris after this loss?
It's hard to say. I think every time your starting quarterback is out for a game, a lot of front offices just sort of wipe that game from the slate. They're not that fussed by it.
But it's Kirk Cousins. It's an experienced guy who last season, for the majority of the season, was the starter. And it's not a new rookie who's completely deer in the headlights in the league and doesn't know what he's doing. Of all the backup quarterbacks in the league, you would think at least he's got a fairly high floor. He's not going to have a huge ceiling, Kirk Cousins, but of all as backups go, you think his floor is a lot higher than a lot of other QBs.
Yeah, and he's costing a lot of money to give performances like that. He was signed to be a starting quarterback, and then they drafted someone to sit behind him. I don't know whether the Falcons' problems can be laid at the floor of the head coach, of the coordinators, of the GM. Somebody will be blamed at the end of the season, but who it'll be, I don't know.
If you were a Falcons fan going into the start of this season, and maybe it's better, when we get Steph on next time, we can ask him this question. But if you were a Falcons fan going into this season, what would your expectations have been?
I don't know. Because the Saints and Panthers, everybody was expecting to be bad, right? You probably were thinking that it's Falcons versus the Bucks for that number one spot in their division. As a non-Falcons fan, I can't really see why anyone would have thought the Falcons would be better than the Bucks. But obviously, if I had rose-tinted glasses on, that I might see that differently. It's hard to say. I don't think anybody can have thought of them as much more than a 500 team, right? A 9-8, 8-9 kind of finish wouldn't have been surprising to me.
Okay, I tipped them as my dark horse. I said that at the start, and I've been disappointed by them. But we'll move on. I'm sure we'll talk about the Falcons again very soon. We'll move on to our third game. The Eagles 38, the Giants 20. A revenge win for the Eagles and Saquon Barkley, but the game was overshadowed by the injury to Cam Scatterbo. Absolutely horrendous, gruesome injury, and it's going to end his season, but it's not maybe as bad as first thought. I mean, I saw it on the TV and I had to look away. It was so disgusting. His foot was almost at a 90-degree angle, wasn't it? It's been classed as a dislocated ankle with a fibular fracture. He's out. He's obviously out for the rest of the season, but he should be ready for OTAs at the start of next season. The surgery went well, the emergency surgery that he had to repair I think it was an open wound that had formed from the dislocation. And this is not only another hammer blow for the Giants, but it's a hammer blow for the league as well, isn't it? Because he's been so fun to watch in the last few weeks.
Yeah, certainly he's a player who's been, helping the TV ratings. He's a guy that I think everybody wants to do well at the moment, and to see that injury is a real shame. I think, Saquon also picks up a little injury in this game. It looked like he pulls a hamstring on a sort of a big run, and I think we see a lot of teams have multiple running backs and sort of big backfield committee backfields, and everyone likes to have the star guy, but it is good to have multiple options because you will always end up with injuries, whether it's a couple of weeks or, in his case, the rest of the season. I did see a report the other day that was along the lines of he called the Giants GM shortly after his injury and said that he wanted to renegotiate his contract such that his signing bonus could be reduced, give back his signing bonus essentially, so that they could use that money to sign somebody else for the rest of the season.
Wow.
Which is,
yeah,
I really hope that long term we're not looking at a guy that's giving his loyalty to a team and then gets classic NFL team loyalty shoved back in his face,
Yeah, especially at a running back position where they seem to be even more unsecure because of the nature of their position in contract negotiations and all of that as well. Yeah, and that injury really seemed to take the wind out of the Giants' sails in this game, didn't it? It was fairly close until the Scatterbo injury. I think in terms of Jackson Dart's performance in this game, I thought he was excellent throughout it. I don't think you can have any complaints with Jackson Dart's performance. In fact, I think it was a really good performance. He's been robbed now of his two best weapons in Malik Neighbors and Cam Scatterbo. And, it's difficult, isn't it, when it must be so frustrating for Giants fans because they've almost seen the potential that's there, similar with the Falcons, really. And we've been talking about the Giants so much and the potential with this team and the the improved performances and the reasons to be positive. But they're now 2-6. The season's completely flipped, it seems, in a couple of weeks, hasn't it?
Yeah. And in fairness, again, I don't see that many people having thought the Giants were going to be a big contender before the season started.
No.
So,
but
maybe they are.
Since it started and they started to pick up a little bit,
yeah.
you thought maybe there's an outside chance of a wild card spot here. That if they can go on a run, and then obviously they lose Neighbors and now they've lost Scatterbo, and it's not looking good now, is it?
No, and there's two other things in this game that I think as a Giants fan you'd have a right to be fairly angry about, right? And the first one is they're on a regular tush push. Kayvon Thibodeau rips the ball out, and the referees deem it forward progress stopped. And I don't think the forward progress was stopped there. I think he's still going forwards when that ball's ripped out. And the Eagles go on to score on that drive, and then that's one touchdown that maybe shouldn't have happened. And then at the other end, late in the fourth quarter, Darius Slayton has a long touchdown called back for offensive pass interference, which, yes, there is a slight push off there, but the guy then gets back to him. There's a lot of hand fighting. It's a very soft OPI to be calling. And I think, if we see that as potentially an extra touchdown for the Giants and one less touchdown for the Eagles, this is suddenly a very, very close game and could have gone very differently.
One thing that the Giants can't complain about, or Giants fans can't complain about being hard done by, is the play of their secondary at the moment, because the secondary is really, really struggling. There's a lot of questions about this defense as a whole. I mean, the defensive front has largely been good, but the secondaries is struggling. I mean, they let Tank Bigsby convert on a 2nd and 31 on a run play. And you're thinking, to me, that's obvious they're going to run the ball, right? They've taken a huge sack. There's no reason for Jalen Hurts to bomb the ball down the field and potentially give an interception away. They're winning the game. To me, that's an easy call that they're going to run the ball and just get as many yards as they can in punt. And they let Bigsby go and get 31 plus yards on that play. At the moment, they're giving up 233 yards passing a game, this secondary. And then I think it was the cornerback, I don't know his first name, Black, who he's been called off the practice squad this week. Let's Jahan Dotson go up and win a jump ball on you. I mean, Jahan Dotson is not a big receiver. He's a slot receiver. And He's gone up and won a jump ball. No AJ Brown in this game as well for the Eagles. So there is problems at the secondary position for the Giants, isn't there? They've been very, very poor.
Yeah, and they're a team that's invested heavily in their, in their defensive line, and maybe let some of the rest of the defense slip. It's Brian Burns' third straight game with a minimum of 2 sacks. As a team, they've got 4 sacks in this game. The Eagles have had 5 sacks in this game. They've clearly invested partly in their defense, but you can't fill every gap every offseason, and obviously their offense for years has been atrocious. So they've attempted to fill those problems for the last couple of years, and the defense maybe a bit like the Bengals, the defense is suffering for the sake of the offense. The flip to that is the Eagles' offense just generally had a massive day. Barkley, massive run to start the game, 174 total yards, 2 touchdowns. Bigsby, only 1 carry up to this game this season, has 9 carries for 104 yards. You've got Devonta Smith, 6 catches on 9 targets for 84 yards. Goddard has 2 touchdowns. The whole Eagles offense really came alive this week, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And for the Eagles, they head into the bye week now this week, which will be, if that Saquon Barkley injury is anything, it's the ideal week for that to be looked at and for him to get some recovery time ahead of the next game. And this was this was big for the Eagles because they lost the game to the Giants just two weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago now. And we, me and Eden discussed, I don't think we'd ever seen 2 divisional games back to back that close to each other. And Saquon Barkley seems to always play well against the Giants. And he does it again. And the Eagles continue that record of not losing to the Giants twice since 2007. So, it was an important game for them to wrong the rights of 2 weeks ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, in a divisional game, it matters that bit more, doesn't it? The Eagles could very easily have found themselves slipping quite quickly if they lost both games against the Giants. And so to go sort of split it probably is about fair in terms of the way the Giants played in the last game compared to this game. I think the Eagles, I'd be very interested to see if other teams now start to try the same thing on the tush push, start to try and rip the ball out rather than actually stop the progress. Maybe that's the way to stop it. Maybe that's what the league's been looking for the last couple of years. But yeah, I think you're quite right. A bye week now is really good for them. Just hope for their sake they can keep the momentum after the bye week, and it's not a stopping point.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Moving on to the 4th game, the Broncos 44, the Cowboys 24. Another Cowboys game and another shootout. Coming into this, we coined it as potentially the best defense against the best offense. And it kind of went the way of the 2 offenses at 44-24, obviously. The Broncos are rolling at the minute, aren't they? They've won 5 straight. And what struck me in this game, they've put up 44 points. Yes, the Cowboys defense isn't great. We'll come on to that. But the Denver offense it's nothing flashy, is it? They're not making huge splash plays. They just work it down the field, mix in pass and run really nicely. They pick up 5-6 yards on each run, 3, 4, 5 yards per carry. Harvey had a big game in this game, and then they work it down the field, 10, 12, 15-yard completions here and there, get it through all of their players' hands. It seems they use the tight end, they use the receivers, and Bo Nix is he's a really solid quarterback at the minute. Again, he suits this offense, not flashy, but gets the job done and is really methodical, isn't he, in his work?
He is, although that, very early on he throws a pick.
That was a bad throw, but
yards behind the receiver. Really, really poor throw. So he still makes the occasional mistake, but I think he's your classic, your classic sort of game manager quarterback that we used to see lots of in the NFL, and maybe we see less now. He just does what he needs to do. And I think, he's using guys who are maybe lesser weapons. Troy Franklin has 6 catches for 89 yards and 2 touchdowns in this game. J.K. Dobbins, who's moved around teams all over the place, has 15 carries for 111 yards. R.J. Harvey, 7 carries, 46 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's using a lot of players on his team, and actually some of the guys that you'd expect to be the main player, Cortland Sutton, isn't really touching the ball very much.
Yeah, and they also, they get another big return off Marvin Mims on special teams in this game. They're using all elements of their team, aren't they? Their defense is obviously great. So that the offense goes onto the field knowing that their defense is going to give them a chance every week. And, you don't have to then perhaps force the ball down the field as much. You can take your time and be more patient and methodical when you have that trust in your defense to stop the opposition. And moving on to the Cowboys, I mean, Pickens and Lamb kept relatively quiet in this game by this really good defense, 78 and 74 yards respectively with no touchdowns. Dak, a more disappointing performance this week, 19 from 34, 188 yards, 2 interceptions. I mean, it feels wrong criticizing Dak, based on the way he's played this season. He's been outstanding, but this was probably his worst game, wasn't it?
Yeah, very, very possibly. And it's fair to say, maybe Eden's probably the better person to ask, but Riley Moss and Pat Surtain might be the best duo of corners in the league. And so, 70 plus yards for both of his main receivers matched up against those guys. Those are really good performances. But, what else do the Cowboys have to offer? Turpin drops a ball on 3rd and 5 in the third quarter. That could have been a big play to keep them moving forwards. The tight ends didn't really add very much today, when normally the Dallas tight ends are playing very well. The run game, Javonte Williams in a sort of revenge game, he plays all right, but it's nothing. It's not like Barkley against the Giants. It's he's done his job kind of thing.
Yeah, and Broncos, as we said, marching on first in the AFC West, which we know is an extremely tough division. And, they've been I've been really impressed with them. I did think at the start of the season that they perhaps overachieved last season, and I said that, but I'm being proved wrong at the moment. And we've talked about a lack of superstar weapons on offense for them, but they're showing that they don't need that at the minute. As you mentioned, Sutton was probably the quietest receiver in this game. It's been like Troy Franklin has really stepped up. They've used the run game well. One thing for the Cowboys, Joe Milton did come into this game and dropped an absolute dime to Tolbert for a touchdown, didn't he? That was unbelievable. I looked at that and I was like, who just threw that? I thought it was CD Lamb at the start. I mean, it was an incredible throw, wasn't it?
Yeah, and you wonder why they brought Joe Milton into this game, other than the fact that they were, losing by so much that it sort of didn't matter anymore. He's one of those guys that I wonder how long he'll be willing to sit in one place and not play, given his college pedigree, given, how when he does get on the field, he's not looking bad. Whether he's someone we might see crop up on another team in a couple of years. He could be quite a good player. And as an ex-lineman, I've got to call into focus that big man interception by Tillman. Lovely feet on the fella, getting his, returning that. Really nice.
He's a big fella, wasn't he? And he could move. Moving on to the final game in our review section, then the Steelers 25, the Packers 35. Rodgers against his old team can't get it done on this occasion. The Packers get Christian Watson back in this game as well, adding to quite a nice bit of depth now at wide receiver. They've got. I really think Romeo Doubs has been impressive this season. He's really stepped up, and he's distinctive in that. What do you call it? A hero cap, is it, or a
guardian cap?
Guardian cap. I call it a coward cap, but there you go. No, I'm only joking. The Steelers led 16-7 at the half. And it was the second half really that this game kind of burst into life, wasn't it? It was a little bit turgid, a little bit messy in the first half, but another huge game for Tucker Kraft. 143 yards, 7 catches, 2 touchdowns. He was a huge part of this win for the Packers, wasn't he?
Yeah, and when certainly on his second touchdown, you can see that from the moment he catches the ball, there's no stopping him. He's going into that end zone, no question. And he's really, really playing well this season. And you're quite right. Christian Watson coming back, 4 catches on 4 targets, 85 yards. That's not a normal game for someone coming back from IR. Normally you'd expect a little drip feed, maybe a couple of plays here and there, but instantly he came back in as a big part of this offense. And I think Jordan Love, there was a point where he had a 20 completion streak.
Yeah.
Which in his entire time at the Packers, Aaron Rodgers didn't do.
Not been done since half.
Half. So, for him, 29 completions, 360 yards, 3 touchdowns. He's really sort of mounting quite a big call to be, in the discussion up there as one of the top guys in the league, someone in the MVP conversation, maybe.
Well, on that point, there was a point in the game, I think it was on Tucker Kraft's first touchdown, and the announcer highlights it, where TJ Watt gets a little bit of pressure from the edge, and Jordan Love has to arc his arm around and almost do a kind of baseball underhand throw instead of the usual overhand throw that he was just about to make. Within a split second, he's able to get that decision made in his mind and execute the pass perfectly to Tucker Kraft. And that really stood out to me as, okay, this kid is elite. This is what elite quarterbacks do. If he's got the ability to recognize that's what he needs to do in that split second and execute it, that to me is as you said, 20 straight completions in a game is just outstanding. And he's such a good quarterback. I absolutely agree. I think it depends obviously what the Packers do as a team this season, whether he's in the MVP conversation or not, but he's certainly for me now an elite level quarterback. And another elite level player I want to highlight, and I brought this up with Eden, I think it was last week. Josh Jacobs is, I think, potentially one of the best red zone running backs, or the best red zone running back in the NFL. I mean, he gets another score in the corner in this game where it's a nice block made in front of him, but he has to skirt around the outside linebacker really quickly, and once he heads for that pylon, there is no stopping him, is there?
No. And you know who made that block on his return from IR? Christian Watson.
Yeah.
He's impacting the game in lots of places. And I think you're quite right. Josh Jacobs, fantastic player. I always sort of thought of him as not having every weapon available to him. Certainly when he was at the Raiders, he didn't feel like he could do everything. But he, now he is clearly the number one guy. There's nobody else in the conversation around him. I think he's looking really, really good for the Packers, isn't he?
Yeah, especially in the red zone. I there's not many running backs in the league I would trust more to hand the ball off to score than Josh Jacobs, if I'm being honest. And then another mention for the Packers defensive front, a huge factor again. Micah Parsons, Rashawn Gary, 2 sacks each. They were a nuisance for Aaron Rodgers in this game. We talked about in the preview that, Rodgers in his 40s now was going to face it from this defensive front, and they did exactly that. Despite Rodgers playing well in this game, don't get me wrong, he was good in this game. But this Packers defensive front is something else, isn't it?
Yeah, they really are special in both the run game and the pass game, and that's why the Packers went out and made that massive trade and the big money deal. At the time, I think we all thought, is that a good choice? Certainly it looks to be paying off at the moment, and we keep talking about teams that are investing in their offense and they've brought in lots of weapons. But the old saying still rings true, doesn't it? Defense wins championships. and I think a couple of these really good teams we're seeing in the league are defense-led teams. And I think the Packers certainly, you could argue, even though they've got an elite quarterback and some really good offensive weapons, that it is the defense that's getting the job done for them. One stat that came out of this game for you, this season so far, league-wide, the completion rate on onside kicks is 2 in 26. It is, near impossible to hit an onside kick. So, when we're watching some of these games and they're looking like a team starting a comeback, it's very, very unlikely, if they're 2 scores down, that onside kick's going to come off for them. Before we move on, I just want to say, across a few of these games we've reviewed today, some of these kits are dreadful.
Yeah, this was a bad game for kits, wasn't it?
That Steelers kit is horrendous. Maybe not so much the jersey in certain scenarios, but the combination of sort of beige pants, the yellow jersey with a little bit of black on the front, matte yellow helmet, terrible. I see the purpose in the Eagles Kelly green kit. I'm not a massive fan. That Broncos throwback kit, I don't like that either. We've had some bad kits this week.
Yeah, we have. That I thought exactly the same. I switched on this game and I was like, oh my God, what are the Steelers? I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of the I don't like the Packers uniforms either. The white one isn't as bad. I don't like the green and the mustard gold pants or whatever. So this was an eyesore for me in this game. But I agree. There was a point once where Jalen Ramsey hit somebody quite late out of bounds, and I couldn't tell whether he'd come from the field or he'd come from the side, whether that was somebody on the sideline and just belted him. And I think it was because I was getting lost in the mirage of colors that were happening on the side. Like, as you said, the bright yellow and black jerseys with the beige cream pants was just horrendous. And then the Packers jerseys mixed in with that, horrendous.
Yeah, it was just one of those things that instantly I turned the game on and I went, I'm not going to enjoy watching this.
Yeah. Just quickly before we move on the Steelers, surprisingly, we think of the Steelers as usually a really solid defensive team. They're giving up the most passing yards of any team in the NFL at the moment. They're averaging 273 passing yards against in the NFL at the moment, and it's really been the offense that has been the key factor for this team. Having said that, I don't think that this loss was necessarily a really bad loss for the Steelers. Yes, it's at home. You never like to lose your home games, but the Packers are a really good team, and I do think the Steelers have shown this season that they are a solid team, and Aaron Rodgers has looked really good, and that they can potentially make the playoffs and potentially have a run.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get on to looking at the playoff picture in a bit, I think. And I think, you're quite right. You lose to another division leader and somewhere else, and it doesn't hurt as much, particularly for the Steelers, who were in a pretty poor division, and everyone else looks like they're likely to lose to the Packers as well. I know the Bengals didn't somehow, but I think it's not a bad loss for the Steelers. DK Metcalf looked good, albeit dropped a couple, but at his touchdown, he sort of just physically outmuscles the guy that's marking him. They're a team that looks like they could do with an extra piece somewhere.
Yeah.
But what that extra piece is, I don't know. I'm certainly, with the trade deadline coming up, it could be time for them to acquire something.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to our Week 9 previews. We're going to start with tonight's game, Thursday Night Football, the Miami Dolphins against the Baltimore Ravens. When you looked at this schedule before the season, you looked at Week 9 and you saw this game, you probably didn't expect these two teams to be where they are. Maybe the Dolphins you did, but certainly not the Ravens. And this is a huge game, isn't it? The Ravens coming off a bye week. Not a bye week, a win last week. And they looked more like themselves, even with Tyler Huntley, a quarterback. He played very well. Lamar Jackson is expected to start and return for the Ravens tonight. And of course, the Dolphins coming in off that much improved win against the Falcons at home. This to me is, it's almost a really bad time to play each other in the way that they're both coming off wins after a disappointing stretch. So they're both eager to build momentum, but one team, unless it's a tie, of course, but that's unlikely, is going to lose this game. And then, do you start starting again almost? It's probably going to be the Dolphins who are going to be feeling like that, let's be honest. But they'll be desperate when both of these teams to put 2 wins together and really get their season back on track. But it's a difficult game for both teams coming off those 2 wins.
Yeah, you've got two teams here that have both only won 2 games this season, and I think it's probably fair to say that whichever one loses is pretty much season over.
Yeah.
Albeit we're only at the halfway point of the season, but I think, maybe less so for the Ravens because they've already had their bye week, so they've got one less notch in the loss column. But certainly, yeah, if the Dolphins lose this, you're probably saying, right, that's season over. And is there anyone with the trade deadline coming up next week? Is there anybody that we want to ship on and see what we can get? Again, it's a battle of 2 pretty atrocious defenses.
Yeah.
The Dolphins defense ranked 29th in the league in terms of PFF grade. The Ravens aren't much better. Jordan Brooks, though, leads the league in tackles with 85 tackles for the Dolphins. So, there are decent players on both of those teams, but they just haven't put it together as a unit, have they?
But that can often come. The tackle leader is often on a bad team where the defense is on the field a lot longer because they're not stopping drives and they're having to make tackles. I think it was last year that it might have been Zaire Franklin for the Colts when they were a pretty bad team last year. So I agree. I think it's 2 horrendous defenses so far this season. However, we talked about in the review, the Dolphins defense last week did look a lot better. Now, Lamar Jackson coming back into this game changes things completely for the Ravens. Is he going to need time to get back to it after the injury? Is he going to hit the ground running? We'll have to wait and see. But the Dolphins, it's a huge game for their defense to really keep him under wraps, keep Derrick Henry under wraps as well. And then trust this offense, that Tua and this offense, that they can do something against the Ravens. And for the Ravens, it's pretty much the same, isn't it?
Yeah, and certainly, Derrick Henry in the last 2 games combined 193 yards, 2 touchdowns. He started to look more like the old Derrick Henry and less like he did at the start of this season. And I think this could be, sometimes we see games that are like 2.5 hours long.
Yeah.
All the other games are only just hitting into the 4th quarter and that game's already finished. I think this could be one of those games. I think if the Dolphins run as much as they did last week and the Ravens try and take the pressure off Lamar in his return from injury by sort of running Derrick Henry into the ground as well, we could be looking at a game that's just running clock all the time and finishes really quite quickly. But it will be interesting to see whether anybody in that Ravens sort of wide receiver room can step up now that they've got their number 1 guy back. Yeah,
will be interesting watch tonight. Let's move on to our second game. The Detroit Lions against the Minnesota Vikings, a divisional matchup. We talked about the NFC North extensively before the start of the season. Vikings potentially been quite disappointing. Sitting 3-4 at the minute. Yes, they've had injuries. Carson Wentz is now out, but JJ McCarthy expected to return tonight. The Lions 5-2, as we would have kind of expected from them. The Vikings coming into this game having lost 2 straight. The Vikings won 1. So at home, this would point to a Lions win at Ford Field, you would think. But again, JJ McCarthy coming back from injury, that does throw a curveball in there, doesn't it? The Lions are not going to have a huge amount of film on JJ McCarthy to go off. And similar to Lamar, can he come in and hit the ground running off his injury?
Yeah, my concern is, with Lamar, he's come back from injury because he's ready to be back. I wonder whether McCarthy would have been playing this weekend if Wentz wasn't now out for the season. Yeah. I wonder whether he's having to be forced back into the lineup, maybe a couple of weekends earlier than they wanted to, perhaps. And so, is he going to be on top form? And what is his top form? We haven't really seen him play to the best of his abilities yet. And I think, we're looking at a Vikings team that's allowed the second most sacks in the league, 19 sacks so far this season, and a Lions team that's got the third highest pass rush win rate with 58.5% pass rush win rate.
And Aiden Hutchinson, fresh off a new contract as well. He's going to be gunning for JJ McCarthy, isn't he?
Yeah, we're looking at a team that gives up a lot of sacks against a team that gets a lot of pressure and a lot of sacks, and a quarterback that's maybe not fully healthy. It could be quite a painful watch. That being said, the Vikings offense, they've got very good weapons, really good wide receivers, a good tight end. If they can get the ball out quickly, not rely on that offensive line too much, they might be able to start getting a bit of momentum. And I think the Lions offense, they're just so good.
Yeah.
Offensively, they're just motor. They've got an offensive line that can just do its job, and they're going to be very tough for the Vikings to slow down.
Yeah, this game, this is a game that the Lions, you would think, should win fairly comfortably, but you never know, because we said that a few weeks ago with the 49ers when they went to the Rams, all banged up, everyone injured, and somehow they found a way to win. And if the Vikings can win this game, it really puts that division in an interesting place. It really throws the balance of that division up again. The Vikings will get back to 4-4, and there'll be one win behind the Lions, who then would be 5-3. And obviously, it would depend on how the Bears and the Packers go this weekend as well. But it would this division is tightly packed still. Even the Vikings, who have been quite underwhelming, especially in the last couple of weeks, they're still in it, aren't they?
Yeah, very much so. And I think at the start of the season we said that about that division. I think end of this season we're going to be saying the same thing. There are two very good divisions in that side of the table. You could be, at this point in the season, easy for me to say it, you could be looking at make the playoffs.
Yeah, that would be crazy.
That's not how it shakes out right now.
Yeah.
But with another half a season to go, if the Vikings and the Bears can find a run of form, that would be, quite something, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be an interesting watch. We move on to our third game that we're going to preview, the Rams going up against the Saints. And the big news in this game is the fact that Tyler Shuck will be starting for the Saints. Spencer Rattler has been benched. What do you make of that decision? I know obviously the Saints have not been good this season, but we expected that. And I don't think Spencer Rattler's been that bad. I think this is slightly harsh. What do you make of it?
It's difficult. I mean, last time I was on, I said I didn't believe in Rattler. And I think it's difficult. Tyler Shuck, I don't quite know how we pronounce his surname, a bit like Scatterbo. I'm not 100% where we stand. He's a rookie, whereas Rattler's been in the league, albeit as a backup for a year already. So they need to see what he can do, right? You don't bring these guys into the building unless you want to see what they're up to. That said, he's one of the oldest rookies ever. He's 26 years old. He spent 3 seasons at Oregon, 3 seasons at Texas Tech, and a season at Louisville before coming to the league. So he got extra eligibility because of COVID and because of injury. He's older than Bryce Young. He's older than Michael Penix. He's older than Trevor Lawrence. He's older than a lot of players in the league, and he needs to, ironically, show himself off in a good light really early, because
very good.
He's a very young. He's a very inexperienced player for his age, and it will be very easy to move on from him if he doesn't. But I don't think Rattler's done anything overly wrong to deserve being benched. So it's just a case of they're a bad team. They may as well see what they've got.
Yeah. Do you think this is, Kellen Moore's decision has been potentially influenced by seeing what Jackson Dart has done at the Giants, for example? Okay, you might not be expecting Tyler Shuck to be Jackson Dart, but you've seen how changing that quarterback and trusting the rookie has given that team a jolt in the arm and has given them fresh optimism. Is he perhaps hoping? Yeah, as we said, they're 1-7. They're not going to be in the playoffs. They're not going to be contending at the top of their division. They are going to be one of the worst teams. But is it more important now for Kellen Moore to get something going with this offense? And he hopes that Tyler Shuck is the injection that it needs to do that.
I think so, and Kellen Moore is probably looking at it and saying, we're 1-7, we're out of it now, pretty much. Not officially, nobody's eliminated yet, but equally, his future is tied to making the right decisions, and he'll be given another year, I imagine, because he's the league's golden boy, and they, all the front offices wanted him to be a future head coach candidate for them. But he needs to know sooner rather than later whether they need to go about acquiring another quarterback in the off-season. And the earlier they can make that decision, the better. Yeah.
Moving on to the Rams, I mean, they've been largely what we expected this season. A really, really solid outfit, sitting 5-2 in a really competitive NFC West. It has to be said, 3 teams in that division now on 3 wins. And the Rams have coming in off 2 wins as well. I mean, on paper, this looks a fairly straightforward game for them. But as we've said before, with that added element, new quarterback, no tape on him really, it adds another element to the game, doesn't it? And I've said it before. I don't think the Saints have been that bad in their actual play this season. They're not a hugely talented team, but I think they've shown a lot of heart and they've shown a lot of fight in some of their performances, and they've been a lot closer than some would have expected. So it's not an easy game for the Rams, is it, by any means?
No, and they're coming off of a bye week. Can they carry on that momentum? But they're getting Puka Nacua back from a minor injury, so they're looking really, really good. On the defense, Byron Young tied 3rd in the NFL, 9 sacks.
He's been outstanding, isn't he?
He's playing really, really well, and I think they're quite a scary unit. The betting odds have the Rams as a 13.5 point favorite. Essentially, a spread of 2 touchdowns, and I think that's pretty close to saying the Saints have no chance without saying the Saints have no chance, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you mentioned Young there. I think there's even more to come from this defensive line potentially as well. I mean, Jared Verse was obviously outstanding last season, and I think Colby Turner as well. There's more to come from the likes of him. So I think they potentially haven't even unlocked the full potential of this defensive front yet either. And if they do that in this game, Tyler Shuck's going to be in for a rude awakening on his welcome to the NFL. Let's move on to our final game that we're going to preview. We're going to take a look at the playoff picture after this one. The Buffalo Bills against the Kansas City Chiefs. And obviously a blockbuster matchup on paper when you see this one in the schedule. I made the, I don't know whether you saw it on our socials, I made the pretty out there analogy about the Chiefs last week, linking them to Robot Wars. Did you watch Robot Wars when you were a kid?
A little bit. probably watched more of the reboot when they rebooted it not that long ago. But yeah.
I likened him to a robot called Typhoon 2, which just he has to run away from opponents, get up to spinning speed, and once he's at full speed, the other robot couldn't touch it because it was just so destructive and it would rip it open. And I said that's what I think the Chiefs are at the moment. They've been getting up to spinning speed, and now they are going to be destructive. However, this is an away game. They've had 3 home games in a row in the last few weeks. This is an away game against obviously a top opponent in the Buffalo Bills. How do you see this one going?
I mean, it's a tough one. It really is. And the Bills, we know how good the Bills are. And they've not needed to get up to spinning speed. They've been good really all season. That said, Isaiah Pacheco's questionable. Is he going to play? Is he out? He's sort of on that borderline. And there's something to be said for Andy Reid when his main running back's injured, somehow creating a 300-yard rushing team out of, a bit of Kareem Hunt and a bit of Jerick McKinnon and, pulling in random guys off of practice squads. So I think, we could be looking at an interesting run game there. Ed Oliver's been placed on IR this week, so that's going to be a massive boost for the Chiefs and a big loss for the Bills. And Mahomes is second in passing yards in the league, 2,099 yards up to this point in the season. So, he's still airing it out, even though he's not had that many offensive weapons up till Rashee Rice coming back from his suspension. But the flip to that, James Cook's leading the league in yards per game. He's not quite leading the league in yards, but they've had a bye week, so he's leading in yards per game. It's good enough. And he's really, really looking worth the big money deal they gave him, isn't he?
Yeah, and he had a big game, didn't he, last week against the Panthers? Bills 5-2 on the season. I was gonna slightly disagree with you in that they've looked a little bit underwhelming, I would say, but they kind of always do at the start of the season. And as we've said, this is, you look at the weapons, especially at wide receiver, it's not huge, but they get it done. They find a way somehow through, as you say, through the aggregate almost, same as the Chiefs. You mentioned there, even when there's a running back out, they find a way to get a 200-yard game or whatever. And I think the Bills are similar. But what I will say is that, last Sunday was a real statement win from the Bills, going up against a Panthers team that were riding high. And, when we previewed that game last week, me and Eden, I said it was a big test for the Panthers defense, who had left a lot to be desired, and they'd relied on their offense, and the Bills put them to the sword, didn't they? So they're riding into this game hot off that win, which was against a tough opponent, I think, and they really handled the Panthers and put them back in a box almost with that performance.
Yeah, and I think for years we've been looking for the 2 quarterbacks that are going to be the next Manning and Brady, right? We've sort of. There was a little window when everyone thought, it might be Herbert and Burrow, and comparing different. It is clearly Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes, right? At the moment, certainly they are clearly the 2 guys that every season we're going to expect to see in an AFC Championship. Every season we're going to expect one of the 2 of them to be pushing for an MVP. They are just something special, aren't they?
Did you see? Was it this week, or it might have been the week before, where Patrick Mahomes goes to the line and swears at the line audibly on the on the mic? You could hear it loud and clear on the broadcast to the sideline that they're not in the fucking right place or something like that, and it's actually a designed play to get the defense off balance, and they run. That's the kind of crazy innovative plays that they just keep coming up with, don't they? And it just works, doesn't it?
Yeah, they're very, very well coached teams, and certainly Andy Reid is on track for a Hall of Fame spot at some point as a coach. And I think Sean McDermott probably had some questions being asked of him at back end of last season, over the off season. I think he's putting those questions to bed now. He is clearly the guy still at the Bills.
Yeah, indeed, going to be a fascinating game as well. Let's move on and look at the playoff picture as we are about halfway through the season now. Let's start with the AFC. The Colts 7-1, number one seed in the AFC. The Patriots 6-2. The Broncos 6-2 in third place. The Steelers 4-3 in fourth. The Bills 5-2 in fifth. The Chargers sixth in 5-3. And the Chiefs 7th, 5-3 in the hunt as well. The Jags 4-3, the Texans 3-4, the Bengals 3-5, and then it goes down to the Raiders and the two win teams there. So you'd probably say to the Bengals really is your hunt at the moment. We talked about the Colts and how good they've been. What do you make of that kind of picture overall at the moment? Chiefs, down in 7th there at the moment. Chargers, Bills in 5th. It's not really shaping up as we thought, is it?
No, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Certainly the AFC East and the AFC West, those two divisions, I think it's fair to say that those teams that are in the playoff picture now are going to stay in the playoff picture. I think the Pats and the Bills, the Broncos, Chargers and Chiefs, they're going to be there. What order they end up in, time will tell, right? I think certainly once you get past the Bills in the East, Miami aren't challenging, the Jets aren't challenging. So 6-2, 5-2, those two teams are going to be battling out for top of that division, and the other one's probably a wild card spot. And then if you look at the other divisions, in the North, the Bengals are only one game behind the Steelers, but they're backup quarterback who's also injured a bit at the moment. They're not really, doesn't look like they're going to end up chasing. But they are probably the next closest team, as you say. But their only way in is if they win the division. I think the only way any other team for the AFC North gets in is if they win the division over the Steelers. The Colts seem to be runaway winners of the South at the moment. There's not a lot to say there, but whether they'll maintain that bye week spot, I kind of doubt it over the length of the season.
Yeah, and talking about the North, and we kind of touched on it last week as well. Do you think that it's a straight shootout now between the Bengals and the Steelers for who the Ravens have started poorly, or do you think having given that win last week and then playing Miami tonight, if they win that game tonight, the Ravens could crawl back into it?
I mean, at the end of the day, there's only 2 games in it.
Yeah.
Right. The Ravens are only 2 games behind, and the Browns are only 2 games behind as well. I just think that it's likely that whoever wins that division is going to be on a 9-8 kind of record, and therefore whoever's second in the division probably isn't in a wild card spot. I think we're looking certainly at an AFC picture where 10 wins is a playoff team, and so the Browns and the Ravens, they've got a lot to do to catch back up if they want a wild card spot. The Bengals could maybe just about sneak in, but they'd need to win a lot of games from here on in.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, I think you're right. You're looking at it. Obviously, you get your 4 divisional winners, and then those 3 wildcard spots look like they're going to probably go to 2 teams realistically in the AFC West, either Chargers, Chiefs, Broncos, and probably the Patriots at the moment from the AFC East. And as you say, the whoever finishes second in the AFC North and the AFC South is going to miss out on the playoffs, unless, of course, there are more twists in the tail. But the Patriots at the moment look good, and you'd have to say that the 3 teams in that AFC West are extremely strong, and you'd back almost all of them to beat a lot of the other teams in the AFC, wouldn't you?
Yeah. And in fairness, if Eden was sat here, he may well say that the Jags are only
of course he would,
because they've had a bye week and the others haven't.
Yeah.
If they hadn't had a bye week, maybe they're 5-3, the same as those teams in the West, and it looks different, doesn't it? So it may be that it's fair to say they're still in the hunt as well, given that they have a winning record. But everybody else that's not in the playoff picture at the moment has a losing record.
Yeah, let's move on to the NFC then. The Green Bay Packers in first place with a record of 5-1-1. The Eagles 6-2 as well in third. Seahawks 5-2 in fourth. The Lions 5-2 in fifth. The Rams 5-2 in sixth, and the 49ers 5-3 in seventh. In the hunt, then the Bears on 4-3, the Panthers 4-4, the Cowboys 3-4-1, and then the Falcons and Vikings 3-4. Commanders as well, you'd have to say, probably not out of it, 3-5. So there's a lot of teams still within an arm's length in the NFC, isn't there? There's the NFC this year. You know, the AFC has probably been the better division over the last few years. The NFC this year feels like it is the better division this year, doesn't it?
Yeah, certainly. We said earlier that we thought, any team in the North could be making the playoffs. There's certainly 3 teams in the West that it's looking quite likely are going to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
And I think, the Panthers and the Cowboys certainly both look like they could put on a run and sneak into a wild card spot quite happily. So really, you're only looking at 4-5 teams that are out of it. I don't think anybody would expect the Saints, the Cardinals, or the Giants now to make it. But that means there's a lot of teams still in the discussion. I think it's difficult sometimes. I've always been a fan of the idea of reseeding once the playoff spots have been decided, because sometimes you look at it and go, I don't really think that division winner deserves home field over the team that's fifth and has 4 more wins than them. And I think the NFC could start to shape up like that if some of these divisions split wins like we'd expect them to.
Well, I'm not a fan of the divisional winners get-in system at all, to be honest with you. If it was up to me, I'd have the old NHL system that they used to run, where it's 1 through 8 out of the 2 conferences. 1 plays 8, 2 plays 7, etc., etc. I think that's the fairest way of doing it. But we've got this system, and to me, this seems, as you kind of touched on there, it seems like there are 2 really strong divisions in this conference, the NFC North and the NFC West, who are, they're obviously battling each other for the chance to win that division, but they're also kind of battling each other in the way of wildcard spots, aren't they? There's a lot of teams there that are playoff worthy teams, probably, that are going to have to fit into 3 spots, and it's going to be fascinating to see which way it'll go. What do you think in terms of those 2 divisions? Who do you think is best placed to win the divisions and then take those wildcard spots?
I don't know, really. I think the West looks interesting at the moment because Seattle is top of it. And I think probably Seattle should be third of the 3 teams there by the time it shakes out. I think the Rams and the Niners overall are better teams than Seattle. Maybe I'm being unfair to Seattle there. Maybe I've not watched a lot of their games because they're West Coast and it's later nights and what have you. And I think in the North, the Bears are 4-3 and just outside the picture. And I don't really rate the Bears, so I maybe they should be further down from that, and then that would mean the Packers and the Lions are fairly certain, playoff makers.
Yeah, I think I'd agree on the Bears point. I think there's potential there, but they haven't shown me enough yet to think that they're a better team than the Seahawks, the 49ers, or the Rams. And they're not. I don't think they're a better team than the Packers or the Lions, obviously. So I would agree that they're probably outside of it for me. The interesting one really for me is the 49ers, because they have had so many injuries, but yet they've still kept themselves alive. They've not been cut adrift by those injuries. do they get better as those players come back? You would think so, but then do they acquire more injuries down the line? Because they seem to just acquire injuries all the time. So they're a really hard one to predict. And obviously, it begs the question: if they carry on with this long list of injuries, is that going to eventually come back to bite them when they've got, that their guys who aren't injured are having to step up into bigger spots down the line when the pressure gets even higher. Their bodies are more tired. There's more football being played. There's less gas in the tank. Is that going to come back to bite them? I think that is the key, really, to this NFC playoff picture, in terms, especially in these two divisions, and how those wildcard spots shake out.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point about the Niners. At some point, questions need to be asked about their training staff.
Yeah, I said this a few weeks ago. I said fire the athletic staff, because what is going on?
Yeah, if they're all short-term injuries, this person's missing a week, this person's missing 2 weeks, something's wrong there.
Yeah,
that's making that happen. I think I'd like to point at the Panthers briefly and say at 4-4, they're looking better, in terms of record-wise, than anybody that's just outside the playoff hunt in the AFC. Where do they go from here?
I think that game on Sunday was quite telling in that their defense is not very good still. There's still a lot of improvements to be made there, and the offense has been largely carrying that defense for the last couple of weeks when they've been on that good run. So I don't see them in a really competitive playoff picture. It's the old adage: defense wins championships. Defense gets you to the playoffs. And I don't see them, unless they significantly improve in the second half of the season, really being able to keep pace with some of the stronger teams, particularly in the West and the North.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with you. I think they may well come down to a Week 18 big matchup. And then it might I don't know who they're playing Week 18. It might come down to the team they're playing's already in the playoffs and they rest their starters and they sneak in. It could be that close.
Week 18, they are playing the Buccaneers away.
Yeah, so if the Bucs are already in, have won the division, clinched it, and are through,
Interesting though, their last 3 weeks are the Bucs at home, the Seahawks at home, and then the Bucs away.
Ooh.
So that's you potentially in week 17 you've got a shootout with the Seahawks, who should still be in playoff contention there. As you said, the Bucs at that point probably have won the division and are probably, especially the way the Falcons are playing at the moment, or could the Panthers be keeping pace with the Bucs? Who I don't know.
That's what I'm thinking. If the Panthers can keep pace, then they've got 2 games against the Bucs in the last 3 weeks, and they're only 2 games behind. Yeah,
huge weeks for the Panthers. Let's round it off there. Thank you very much, Ollie, again for joining us, and enjoy the games this week, and we will see you again next week.